This piece on the left is interesting as well, because this piece on the left is a picture of a line or a border, and then a field, another line and a border, and a field, and another line and a border. So this picture, this is like a side view, this side profile, this type of pattern, but this would be very similar to looking at a kind of an above view of the same event. So if we were to look at this from the side, we would have a road or some type of border, or maybe this represents a canal, and then we have the fields. This division of the fields is actually representing the canals that interlace the fields. Now, has anyone ever been to Europe or just a part of the country where you've walked through small fields, kind of farming fields? So I can remember when I was in Germany, walking through some of these fields, and it's all just a system of canals. You're either up on a dike, looking down at a canal. All the fields are sort of created in such a way that you're up on this high point, there's water, and then the field is actually higher than the canal for the most part. But you can open these sluice gates and allow the water to enter into the I want to say tissues, because I'm thinking about this as a metaphor for the body, but you allow it to enter into the fields, into the soil there, and then you can close the sluice gates again when you want. That's really, in a lot of ways, what the kidneys are doing, but it relies upon the same principle of kind of a high point and a low point. Here we have it filled with water, here we have the dike with someone walking on it, and then another high point, the field itself, a low point. This is basically the same sort of picture here, this qiang, which means strength. So when we talk about the kidneys, it's a shengzhi, that which is the kidneys, zuo qiang zhiguan. It's the opposite of this zuo and qiang. This picture is very much, in my opinion, sort of a picture of the nephron, that same sort of allowing it to either resorb fluid as it passes through or to allow fluid to leave. This same pattern here with the fields in very rainy times would allow the water to simply pass right by the soil, because you've got the fields up higher. As long as you keep these sluice gates closed, they'll pass right through those canals and out of your area there. But in dry times, you have a repository of fluid. You can open those gates up and allow the fluids to enter into the tissues. That's more or less precisely how the kidneys work. When we're dehydrated, what happens is the kidneys produce more aldosterone, produce more angiotensin. The blood pressure decreases, and as a result of a decreased glomerular filtration rate, a decrease in the amount of fluid that's leaving from these tufts and entering into the Bowman's capsule, certain hormones are released by the structures surrounding that capsule, by the macula densa. And those hormones increase your blood pressure because they reduce the amount of fluid that's actually excreted by the nephron. They reduce the amount of ions that are resorbed by the nephron. And then in times when we're drinking a lot of water, say, we're just down in one big gulp after the other, during those times then these gates are more or less left open, and the minerals and whatnot can leave, and we can just kind of pee it out, and again we can maintain an even, a steady blood pressure. Adrenal means adrenal. It's on top of the kidney. Now, a Western physiologist would say that the adrenal glands are, in a way, unrelated to the kidneys. The adrenal glands belong to the endocrine system, and the kidneys belong to the urinary system. The adrenal glands, which sit atop the kidneys, they're only a few steps removed from what the kidneys do. With age, what happens, especially with urination is a complex of parasympathetic and sympathetic responses. Okay? And it also has to do with a lot of a smooth muscle that surrounds the bladder in particular. Anytime you have a dysregulation of those two responses, or anytime you have a shortening of their ability to kind of, to undulate like this, for there to be first a sympathetic and then a parasympathetic response and then a sympathetic response, just this very same bow shape. With age, that bow gets flatter and flatter, or you might think of it as the waves are getting smaller and smaller. And so what happens is the normal orchestration of urination becomes dysfunctional. So in order to urinate properly, you need both parasympathetic and a sympathetic response kind of happening almost in unity with one another. But for instance, and one thing that I see in the clinic on some of the drug rehabilitation clinics, people who use marijuana very regularly, they have the exact same rubric of symptoms that you're describing and that are very common in old age. In their case, what's happening is they are messing sort of with their own sympathetic and parasympathetic response to the point where they're also no longer able to kind of regulate their urination, so they have increased urgency, and they also have dribbling. That last line there, 做强, to make stronger, to make strength. If you think about the kidneys, you can say, well, how's it that the kidneys make you strong or give you strength? Well, they maintain homeostasis, but really every organ does that. But when you look at the adrenal glands in particular, in the cortex, you have a number of hormones, a number of endocrine substances that are released. One of them is cortisol. Another one, maybe more significant in males, but it's also significant in females maybe to a lesser extent, is testosterone. It's also produced and then released by the adrenal cortex. Now, testosterone, as we know, it increases muscle mass. It kind of gives you strength, that type of thing. Probably more important is the release of adrenaline or epinephrine. That's released from the medulla of the adrenal gland, and that has very much to do with this territoriality, this fight or flight response. Adrenaline is released when there's some sort of stress, just as cortisol is released when there's some sort of stress on the body. And it's released so that the blood is shunted to the muscles, the vasculature, or the air passages of the lungs dilate. It actually gives us a feeling of increased strength. So we've probably all heard the story about the lady whose son is or daughter is trapped under the car. She's able to lift the car up and kind of pull it off the kid and get her out of there. She's fine, but then the next day she feels like she was hit by a truck. What happens there is that intense stress response, there's a massive release of cortisol, also a massive release of adrenaline. All of her sort of faculties, all of her blood sugar and blood and oxygen, all that goes into the muscles. Cortisol is released en masse, so that the normal effects of inflammation and pain are greatly dampened. She's able to perform this sort of single feat, and then the next day when she's resting and digesting, she might feel the effects of that.